Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming for the kickoff event of the Good Governance and Citizenship Observatory housed at the Asfari Institute. We're holding this event during extraordinary times in the region, horrific times, and I would like to ask you to stand for a few moments of silence to recognize the innocent lives lost in Palestine. Thank you. I would like to welcome you and thank you all for being here. And I wanted to take a moment to just take us through, very, very briefly, take us through the pathway that got us here. In May this year, we had the first inaugural citizenship conference. We then, on opening day, on September 4th, with President Khoury's address to the AUB community, there was a further unfolding of the whole concept of citizenship, but also the crisis of citizenship in our region. A few weeks ago, during the opening of an initiative by a colleague, Dr. Makram Rabbah, there was also a very strong and vocal conversation on the need for AUB to be active in reimagining, reconstructing citizenship in the MENA region, but particularly in Lebanon. Yesterday, during Founders Day, President Khoury's address and Dr. Hitti's address focused essentially on citizenship, and so did the winning essays of our students. And this was followed yesterday by the announcement of the launch of this observatory that we're celebrating and commemorating today with the first kickoff activity. Before I give the floor to the introductory remark by President Khoury, I just want to acknowledge the immense support that got us here from President Khoury, the Provost Office, Trustee Muashir, and our amazing Good Governance and Citizenship Observatory Steering Committee. And I would like to recognize Dr. Sauma Boujawdi, Dr. Tanya Haddad, Dr. Bashar Haidar, Dr. Ohannes Gökşen, Dr. Ghada Fleihan, my colleague Carla Ail, and last but not least, the founding director of this initiative, our colleague Simon Kachar. Getting us here was truly a labor of love, a labor that truly can only happen within a space like AUB. Thank you all very much for all your support. I would like to introduce President Khoury to start with his opening remarks.
Okay. Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests. It's a profound sense of, frankly, confidence that I stand before you today at the launch of the Good Governance and Citizenship Observatory at the American University of Beirut's Asfari Institute for Civil Society and Citizenship. This is a momentous occasion because it marks not just the inception of a new chapter in our university's storied history, but it represents a beacon of hope and a steadfast commitment to the ideals of responsible governance and active citizenship in the MENA region. I say this without criticism, but we're seeing some of the oldest democracies in the world struggle with that very concept of governance. So it's time that we got serious about engaging in it in Lebanon. Today, we're reminded once more, not just of the enduring legacy of the American University of Beirut in fostering enlightenment and progress, but with the responsibility that comes with that legacy. The Good Governance and Citizenship Observatory is not just one of our latest endeavors in our journey towards bridging the gap between academic inquiry and tangible societal change. Rather, it reflects our strong sense of urgency and our unwavering commitment to explore the intricate tapestry of citizenship and its crucial role in cultivating good governance. In the MENA region, we have been continuously confronted with crises of citizenship. One is left to ponder what's the essence of citizenship in an environment where educational curricula have now taken to overlooking its importance. There's essentially a hollowing out of the citizenship part of the curriculum. So how do we define citizenship in contexts where transparency is scarce and rights are frequently marginalized? These are not merely rhetorical inquiries, by the way, but rather they're a clarion call to action. They compel us to re-envision citizenship beyond the conventional norms, to perceive it as a dynamic, participatory relationship between individuals and states. I've often said citizenship is not a TV program, it's a contact sport, if you understand what I mean. In countries marred by oppression, the concept of citizenship and the social contract undergoes the most strenuous possible test of integrity. When and where states are oppressive, citizenship must transcend mere legal status. It has to embody a struggle for inclusivity and democracy. It represents a collective endeavor to amplify the voiceless and ensure that every individual, irrespective of their nationality or their father's passport, possesses a stake in that nation's story, that that individual is empowered and able to play a role in shaping their destiny and the destiny of their nation. So this brings us to the very concept of citizenship, something Aristotle spent a lot of time thinking about that I referenced in our opening day remarks. We can definitively state today, in 2021, that a good citizen cannot be a passive bystander in the societal fabric. Rather, they must be an active participant, and that being a quote-unquote good citizen entails engagement, responsibility, and the relentless pursuit of equity and justice. The words of former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, echo profoundly. He said, "No one is born a good citizen. No nation is born a democracy. Rather, both are processes that continue to evolve over a lifetime. Young people must be included from birth. A society that cuts off from its youth severs its lifeline." Notice he says nothing about citizenship and hereditary right to citizenship. He talks about a dynamic process. So this observation underlines the pivotal role of educational institutions like AUB in nurturing young minds. At AUB, it's our duty and it's our privilege to guide our youth, fostering in them the qualities of good citizenship and democratic values. We don't take lightly that parents send their children to us to undergo the journey of becoming an AUB citizen. At the American University of Beirut, we are expected to foster in them qualities of good citizenship and democratic values. Here we've consistently championed this perspective. We continue to nurture our students and faculty to not just acquire knowledge, but to apply that learning for the betterment of society. The 16th US president, I would argue the greatest US president, Abraham Lincoln, who led America through the end of the Civil War and ended slavery in the United States, said in 1862 in his message to Congress when things were particularly dire for the Union, he said, "Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history." I believe that is true of us here. We also cannot escape history. We have to recognize this fact and understand that the role of our university in bridging the educational gap in history and the drive to citizenship is paramount. We are not mere disseminators of knowledge. We are sculpting minds to comprehend the significance of their societal contributions, true, but we are also learning from these young minds and moving towards a better model of citizenship, including citizenship in the university. Our curricula, our programs, our initiatives are all meticulously designed to cultivate an environment where critical thinking and civic engagement are not the exception, but the norm. This is where people come to make mistakes, but make them passionately but non-violently. As I've said since day one in the job, it's okay to make mistakes. That's how we learn. That's how we move towards good governance, which is intricately intertwined with responsible citizenship. Good governance is about establishing systems that embody transparency, accountability, and inclusiveness. As we inaugurate the Good Governance and Citizenship Observatory today here at the Asfari Institute, under the leadership of Simon Kachar, who has been with us from the beginning, constantly struggling with this concept, we have to renew all of our dedication to these ideals, aspiring to influence policy reforms and to foster a culture of participatory governance. Gone is the day when we say, as AUB, we keep our distance from the governments of Lebanon and the region. No, we want to be in the governance, influencing the governance, and impacting the governments of this part of the world, all of them, unabashedly, unashamedly, but with evidence and with peaceful, vigorous exchange of ideas. In reflecting upon the challenges and opportunity that lay before us, it is essential to recall the words of H.G. Wells. He said, "Our true nationality is humankind." I have always felt my true nationality is humankind. I want people to leave AUB and Lebanon, if they must, feeling that their nationality is humankind, that their roots and their citizenship are not only in Lebanon and the region, but in the world. This poignant statement of Wells, which echoes through the corridors of time, resonates in our endeavors today. It reminds us of our collective responsibility towards nurturing a world where governance is not merely efficient, but empathetic. We hear lots of that in the Arab world. A lot of efficient and quote unquote empathetic governments where no one can say a word askance. But citizenship has to be defined not just by borders, but by shared humanity and the willingness to accept opinions that do not jibe well with your own point of view. I think you don't need to hear from me to know that our region stands at a pivotal juncture. The challenges that are faced by the people who live in the Arab world throughout the MENA region are formidable. But I'm happy to say that, at least in my view, those challenges are dwarfed by the opportunities that beckon before us. The Good Governance and Citizenship Observatory is not simply an academic initiative. It represents a movement towards a profound social transformation, the kind of social transformation we put before our students when they are engaged in major aspects of community service. So I'm delighted we're embarking on this journey today with the conviction that through education, dialogue, and active participation, we can redefine this narrative of citizenship and governance in the MENA region. Let us collectively strive to create a future where each and every individual is not only informed and engaged, but is empowered, that that individual is an active contributor to upholding democratic values, human rights, and societal well-being for all. Thank you, and I wish us all a fruitful and transformative event and journey ahead. Like medicine, the art is hard, the road will be long, but it will most definitely be worthwhile. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Khuri. When we were preparing for this event, we invited a very dear friend to AUB, a very dear friend to the Asfari Institute, Saba al-Mubaslat, to give a keynote address. And Saba and I had a long conversation, and she decided, or she suggested rather, that it would be better to have a conversation, to have a keynote dialogue, which would be a little bit out of the box, but it would be a conversation between Saba and myself as the ways in which, as women, we experience what is our lived experience of citizenship. But before we start, and before we go through this conversation for the next few minutes, I would like to introduce Saba, who's an extraordinary friend. Saba is the regional director of the Ford Foundation. She is based in Cairo. I think she's just returned to Cairo from Mexico City. She would have liked to be with us in person, but I think all travel to Lebanon is now frozen, so maybe next time, Saba. Before taking this post, Saba was the CEO of the Asfari Foundation in London. We have a long history of collaborating together, but we also have a long history of friendship, of conversation, of bouncing ideas, and of thinking about the world. So thank you, Saba, for being with us. We really, really appreciate it, especially after a very long travel. Thank you so much, Saba. When we were preparing for this conversation, I think we wanted, or you suggested, that we delve into ourselves, particularly for you as somebody who has set roots in places and then uprooted and lived in different countries and had to, reinvent a life in different places, but also as a woman who has been mobile and in different geographies and with different responsibilities. Would you share with us what has it meant as a citizen, as somebody who is on paper Jordanian, but what does it mean being everywhere and being active everywhere and having a life in different geographies that are diverse?
Yeah, Lina, first of all, thank you so much and congratulations. I mean, I'm so looking forward to engaging with you and this great initiative, not necessarily only as Ford Foundation, but as, Saba, because I think what you're doing is remarkable. And it's really hard to come after Dr. Khuri because he leaves nothing for no one to say. He was quite comprehensive. When people ask me where you're from, usually it's a simple question and it has to have a simple answer, but I find it quite complex, really, to answer such a question. I was born with so many identities and I'd say belongings. I was born in Beirut. Registered as a refugee with UNRWA. I carry two nationalities, one from the global south, Jordan, which is so dear to my heart, and another from the UK. So when you ask me where home is, it really takes a while for me to come up with an answer. I think what started this question was when we were little kids, when the school would come to an end, all those in my class, and it was an international class, would say, we're going home. And for me, that was not an easy thing to say. So I think after working and living in 9 different countries and traveled to 79 different countries, some of which multiple times, if you ask me where home is, I'd say I'm still searching. One thing I learned from the journey is that you can carry home within, and you really can grow roots. And those roots can be shallow, just like the seasonal plants that live only for one season, or can be very, very deep, like an olive tree. It's a matter of choice to want to belong. What strikes me sometimes is that it's not a decision you make on your own. The land, the place, the people in which you live have to allow you to belong. So it's not as easy as it sounds, but you always try to travel the world carrying home within and leaving some of you, hopefully good parts of you, in any place that you live in, because you want to contribute to the place where you live. And I think that's the global dimension of citizenship. You cannot just live there temporarily. You have to find a way to belong.
Absolutely. And we had a conversation a few months ago, and I remember it very well. And you were asking yourself, if I want to go back home, where do I go back to? Which, is beyond an existential question. And I remember us discussing it and what it means. But I want to go back to, living citizenship or experiencing citizenship, but as women. And in which way has it been different for you, Saba? Because we've always, as feminists, we've always challenged the fact that citizenship is not neutral. It has different repercussions, different lived experience, depending on who you are, what is your gendered identity. So I'm interested to know from you, what has been your identity as a woman?
Yeah, I think citizenship can be gendered in certain places. And with that, I mean both the kind of official relationship with the government, where you find in certain contexts that as a woman, you may have less rights, or you're excluded, you're not seen as a full citizen because of, the assumption that you have to be dependent on or take permission from. And while the legal or political sides might evolve, the cultural aspects remain always a challenge. So it's really intriguing because you can sometimes find that you are less gendered, or your citizenship is less gendered in foreign places and more gendered in places where you have people who look like you and should be sharing so many dimensions of their identity with you. Being a woman makes it add a layer of complexity to it, because you have to always prove that you can live independently, you can be active, you can interact, you can be productive, and that being a woman does not necessarily make you less of a citizen than your fellow man in that context. So unfortunately, particularly in the Arab world, in certain contexts, while the legal frameworks might be evolving, but the cultural dimensions of the interpretation of law or its way of being translated to action can be sometimes limited by our cultural rigid framework. So that's a long way to walk, but I think we're finding more solidarity in women like us who come together to teach us, how to overcome the challenges and how to always find our place around the table and be heard and be vocal, but in a way that respects really the legal framework. So it's a very complex relationship, and I think being a woman doesn't make it any easier.
Exactly. And I think even if we forget, there is a set of rules, written and unwritten, that keep reminding you that you're a subordinate human being, that actually you don't have the same rights and entitlements. And speaking about not having same rights and entitlements, I wonder if we can, or if you have any reflections on what is happening in context of violence, in context of forced displacement, in context of basically in context of war. What is happening now in Gaza? What are your reflections in terms of the futurity, in terms of, we've also been trying to argue that, and I know that our colleague Dr. Faisal Qaq has been making a case for women in Gaza and the ways in which they have been affected and continue to be affected way more. What are your reflections about women citizens, or women also non-citizens, in context of war and displacement and violence, including conflict-related sexual violence?
Well, Lina, my background before joining more of the funders world was really in humanitarian work, and I either participated or led teams in 16 active war zones, twice in Gaza and during 2 wars. And it's really challenging because women show how strong, reliable, and independent they can be, and how they can stand up and protect their children and fight for the children's rights in contexts like Gaza. But at the same time, I think we don't highlight the heroines in those conflicts enough. We don't give enough voice. You hear about resistance being led by men. You hear about fight for rights being led by men. Trying to liberate or free the land being led by men. But I think that would have been absolutely impossible if it wasn't for the day in, day out fights that women lead in silence, and that silence needs to be broken. We need to give space for those women to talk about their share of the fair fights that happen in our region in particular. We sometimes stigmatize a population by saying, they're religious or conservative or what have you. I've seen women fighting, with all the conservatism in their reality, fighting for the rights of themselves and their children. What's heartbreaking is that, like in Zaatari camp, for instance, I've seen women suddenly finding their freedoms because of the war, because of the struggle. Women who were homebound or were not allowed to continue their education, suddenly when they are living in a refugee camp, having to fight the fight for their kids and for themselves, they find their voices and they find their feet, and they start realizing that they can lead an independent life and they can generate income. And I find it really a bit intriguing, when you sit and talk to these women, how their fears start to take different shape. They fear that after the war, if they have or when they have to go home, some of those freedoms might be taken away from them. I think women re-explore their freedoms in times of conflict, and that's something that needs to be given a lot of our attention so that that freedom found is not taken away from them when the war comes to an end.
Thank you so much, Saba. Every conversation with you is enlightening and enjoyable. I hope next time you will be with us in person. And if you are with us in person, it means that there has been some improvement in the situation. So I'm really hoping for this too. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you will stay with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. While you're going through the conversation for the coming panels, please remember that for some of us, Al-Watan does not translate to any other language. There is no translation in English to the word Al-Watan. We translate it to home. And for some of us, we live between two statements. One for Mahmoud Darwish that says, على هذه الأرض ما يستحق الحياة. And one for Ghassan Kanafani that says, Al-Watan هو إلا يحدث هذا كله. So let's, between these two brackets, think of citizenship. And thank you again. It's an honor to be with you.
Thank you so much, Saba. Saba, if you can stay with us, that would be really good. Thank you. Yeah. I would like to invite our dearest friend and colleague, Dr. Sauma Boujawdi, for his keynote. Dr. Sauma Boujawdi is a special advisor to the president and the former interim dean of the Faculty of Arts and Science.
This is not a keynote. Good afternoon. My talk is going to be about the citizenship education in Lebanon. And what I will cover is, first of all, the concept of citizenship in Lebanon, and especially in the Lebanese curriculum. What is the current status of citizenship education in Lebanon? Key issues and problems with citizenship education in Lebanon, and this is all at the K-12 level, the pre-college level. And then I have a few reflections and some recommendations for future actions. Okay, now since achieving independence in 1943, Lebanon has persistently employed education as a tool to promote social unity in a nation characterized by diversity, featuring 18 official religious sects and numerous political parties. Three major educational reforms occurred in 1946, 71, and 97, each responding to significant social and political events in Lebanon. These reforms also reconceptualized the ideal citizens' concepts by altering the content of citizenship-related subjects like civics, history, and geography. Initially, and in 1946, the focus was on a Lebanese identity, but this shifted towards an Arab identity in 1971 during the rise of Arab nationalism. Ultimately, in 1997, curriculum following the 1975-1990 civil war emphasized a dual identity of being both Lebanese and Arab. Actually, the dual identity is also emphasized in the recently published Lebanese National Framework for General Pre-University Education Curriculum. This is the precursor of the new Lebanese curriculum that is happening at this time. Now, what does the citizenship in the 1997 national curriculum? I'm going to talk only about the two latest curriculum developments or reforms. The national, which is still in effect until now, defines citizenship as active belonging to a public national entity that ensures the enjoyment of rights and freedoms and constitutes a space for positive interaction between citizens and responsible participation in public life based on respect for the law and a system of common public values. Now you're going to see that they have very advanced definitions. However, the problem is what's happening in the schools at this time. So in the 1997 curriculum goes in a lot of detail about the concept of citizenship. They look at three components. They talk about intellectual and humanitarian level, national level, and social level. For example, at the intellectual and humanitarian level, they say belief in and commitment to Lebanon as a homeland of freedom, democracy, justice, as defined by the Lebanese constitution and laws and protected by them. Belief in the commitment to humanitarian values and principles that respect human beings, emphasize the importance of reason, and promote knowledge, work, and ethics. So those are under the intellectual and the humanitarian level. Under the national level, those are only two. There are many others. It's a lot of detail. Under the national level, Lebanon is a free, sovereign, independent country, the final homeland of all its citizens, one land, one people, and one institution within the boundaries specified in the Constitution and internationally recognized. And as I said, Lebanon is Arab in identity and belonging, and is founding and active member of the League of Arab States. On the social level, they say the supremacy of the law over all citizens is the means to achieve justice and equality among them. Respect for individual and collective freedoms guaranteed by the Lebanese Constitution, and participation in social and political work within the framework of Lebanese parliamentary democratic system. And many other components. However, they go into the details. And what is interesting is that this definition, those definitions actually appear in the citizenship education, in the objectives of civics education courses that are required by students at all levels in the Lebanese system. Now, the most recent formulation of the, and this was published last year in July, I think, officially. They don't have a detailed definition of citizenship. However, they say the tensions and crises that the Lebanese have suffered and continue to endure in recent times, the corruption that has infiltrated various aspects of their lives, and the absence of accountability practices have necessitated the focus in the curriculum on citizenship education to ensure that citizens' understanding of the public good becomes direct, not through the political and sectarian clientelism, but through state institutions. And also, this underscores the role of education in educating learners and nurturing them to fulfill their national roles and engage in public affairs by embracing efficiency, fostering transparency, integrity, accountability, combating corruption, and enhancing their responsibility in developing the concept of common good, expanding it towards greater justice and equality. Very well said, but I don't know what happens as a result. What's happening now is that the curriculum has not been produced in detail. I think this is happening now. Let's hope that something happens based on this. What the Center for Education Research and Development has done now is they have developed a framework for citizenship education that can be used in developing new books. And now for the current situation. There were a lot of studies that were done on citizenship in Lebanon. I am citing a number of them here if people are interested, and some of the ideas that I'm presenting are based on this, and there are many other studies that you can find in Arabic and English, and this is not only about citizenship in Lebanon, but it's also about citizenship in the Arab world, because our own Marwan Maashar has written a lot about citizenship in. Now, what has happened is that most studies show that citizenship education is in crisis in Lebanon, and also other Arab countries. And actually, this is not only because citizenship education, because education is in crisis as well. And citizenship education in Lebanon specifically faces several challenges and issues, some of which are rooted in the country's complex political and social landscape. For example, there are many of them actually. Sectarianism and identity politics. So what we can say here is that Lebanon's political system is based on a confessional system that divides political power among religious sects. This sectarianism often seeps into education, making it challenging to promote a unified sense of citizenship. Many Lebanese students are taught within their sectarian communities, leading to limited interaction and understanding between different religious and ethnic groups. Then, lack of a unified national curriculum. You know that in Lebanon we have too many different curriculums. Lebanon does not have a unified national curriculum for citizenship education. Instead, various sectarian authorities oversee their educational curricula, which may emphasize different historical narratives, values, and beliefs. The lack of uniformity makes it difficult to foster a common national identity. This is a reflection of the freedom of education enriched by the Lebanese constitution, and I'll have a comment on this. The third one, and I'll show all of them so that we don't have to. Dominance of rote learning and memorization within minimal opportunities to discuss controversial issues. So the curriculum and most of the textbooks focus on ideals, steering away from encouraging dialogues and explorations into topical and controversial issues. Now, one thing that Dr. Bashar Hader and I did was analyze the civics textbook of a middle school classroom. And it's a totally set of memorized entities that do not teach anything about citizenship. Then, of course, political interference, and everybody knows about it. Political parties and sectarian leaders can sometimes influence the content of educational materials and curricula. This interference can lead to the promotion of sectarian ideologies over inclusive citizenship values and concepts. You know, this is also reflected in the committees that are formed to develop the curriculum. The committees have to represent everybody in the country, and therefore everybody pushes for their own. Of course, as an education person, there is no insufficient teacher training. We don't have enough training on the teaching of citizenship. In the education system in Lebanon, there is limited civic engagement. Lebanon has a history of political apathy among its youth, in part due to the disillusionment with the political system. Citizenship education programs often struggle to engage students in meaningful civic activities and discussions. And this is, the next one is a very interesting idea, is conflicting national narratives. Lebanon has a history of civil conflict, and different groups may have conflicting narratives about the country's history and identity, and a reflection of this is the lack of a history textbook that we agree upon. These conflicting narratives can complicate efforts to teach common understandings of citizenship and history. Of course, the socioeconomic disparities are a factor here. They can affect access to quality education, including citizenship educations. Students from marginalized communities may not have the same opportunity to learn about their rights and responsibilities as citizens. There are limited resources. The Lebanese education system has faced numerous constraints and challenges, including funding shortages, which can hinder the development and implementation of effective citizenship education programs. And finally, and this is most recently, the refugee crisis in Lebanon has created a lot of problems that affected the way we think about things. Now, we can add more if you want, but those are some of the things that I found in the literature. I have two reflections. Actually, Article 10 of the Lebanese Constitution, sometimes we pride ourselves, states Education shall be free insofar as it is not contrary to public order and morals and does not affect the dignity of any of the religious creeds. There shall be no violation of the rights of religious communities to have their own schools, provided they follow the general rules issued by the state regulating public instruction. I think this, for some, is a blessing, but for most of us is a curse. Because allowing religious communities to have their own schools and universities allowed them to preserve their identities, but did not help them to develop a unified Lebanese identity. Actually, we need more institutions like AUB, because probably this is one of the few places where we have mixed people living together and working together and knowing each other. Another reflection when I read the, where does this come from? Where does the situation come from? I think the focus of education reform in Lebanon, and actually in many other Arab countries, is on reforming pre-university educational systems. What is needed, in my opinion, is reform of the university level at the university, because universities prepare teachers and other professionals who work in schools and influence the whole society. Accreditation could be the vehicle for continuous, meaningful change that highlights the importance of preparing active and productive citizens who promote transparency, integrity, accountability, combating corruption, and advocating greater justice and quality. What I'm saying is that if we have an accreditation system that takes those values into consideration, we might start reaching some common understandings. Now, how can AUB, since we're at AUB, play a role in tackling the issues mentioned above? I think AUB is doing a lot. When I thought about it, when we look at our mission emphasizes civic responsibility, leadership, personal integrity, and so on. And actually, the fact that we adopt a liberal arts education system builds students into free thinkers, open communicators, knowledgeable citizens, and respectable individuals is a major issue in preparing good citizens. Encouraging faculty to emphasize the development of critical and creative thinking is in all our curricula. Requiring participation in community service, which is a new GE requirement now, is another factor. Providing opportunities for students to take on leadership roles and actively participate in decision-making processes at the university level, another thing that we do. Promoting diversity and inclusion in the curriculum, and so on. All those are things that AUB does, and maybe AUB is a model that can be emulated in this respect. However, I think we can do more to encourage the development of citizenship. I hope I'm not taking too much time. We need to integrate citizenship education into the regular curriculum, in all curricula. This requires that the learning outcomes of selective programs and required courses should be focused on citizenship education. Faculty members can be encouraged to use respectful debate and discussion in the classroom. This will also require that program and course learning outcomes be developed and assessed regarding citizenship. Discuss current events and global issues in the classroom, relating them to civic values and responsibilities. Help students to critically analyze news sources and develop their own informed opinions and not depend for their news on social media. Teach students responsible digital citizenship, emphasizing ethical online behavior and the impact of social media on public discourse. Finally, to be implemented, the above recommendation requires that programs and course learning outcomes, of course I'm in education, be developed and assessed for each of the activities. If we're not intentional in this, I don't think we're going to reach anywhere. Ongoing professional development opportunities for education to enhance their understanding of civic education principles and teaching methods. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boujawdi, for the voice of wisdom, as always. Thank you ever so much. I would like to invite Dr. Simon Kachar, the founding director of the GGCO. It has an acronym now, for his final remarks, and then we move to the panel.
Thank you, Lina. President Khuri, Provost Dawy, esteemed guests, dear colleagues and friends. 6 or 7 months ago, President Khuri asked to see me briefly in his office. I thought we were gonna strategize on the end of year functions as usual. But when I entered, he directly told me, بالحرف, Simon, we want to work on something that will have a positive impact on the national, regional, and why not, international level from the perspective of good governance and nation building. And we want to do this with Université Saint-Joseph and with the Fouad Chehab Foundation. Please start thinking of a concept and working on a plan that should be concretized beginning of next year. The rest is history, and we are now witnessing on the birth of this idea. Everything that we did and still do is based on AUB's mission and vision, and on the motto on the main gate that they may have life and have it more abundantly. And this is why the Good Governance and Citizenship Observatory was created and is being launched now, and will be working in full focus on issues related to the advancement of human beings as good citizens, based on different pillars, that most important of which are education, as education plays a crucial role in shaping responsible and engaged citizens, and constitutions, as constitutions establishes the right, duties, and privileges of citizens, outlining the criteria for acquiring and maintaining citizenship with the objective of empowering citizens to be informed and active participants in their communities and governance processes, so that our initiative can lead to the change that should occur in the mentalities of young elites, leading to an intellectual and moral revolution that breaks out in Lebanon, so Lebanon will be able to play its role internally as a cohesive factor and abroad as a global cultural hub. The raison d'être for Lebanon's existence and continuity is human in the first place. And that's why our main goal is to work on enhancing citizenship, advancement, and participation so that real change can exist in Lebanon and the region. Allow me to thank you again, Mr. President, Mr. Provost, for everything. I also want to thank my dear colleague, Lina Abu Habib, who did not hesitate for 1 second when I met with her and discussed the idea to house us, or to house the initiative at the Asfari Institute and be a major partner in this project. Thanks as well to all my colleagues who accepted to be part of the observatory and serve on its steering committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I would like to ask you all if you would like to grab a coffee and come back, and we will move to the panel with the moderator, Dr. Tanya Haddad. So please grab a coffee and come back, and then I'm leaving it to Tanya to lead on the second segment of the event. Thank you. It's actually, yes, 5 minutes coffee and a biological break.